Jon Ledyard, listening carefully, I'm sure, to our conversation about whether Bulldog likes mint candies.
He's like, boy, well, you guys haven't called me in a while. I miss you.
I miss this show.
John. Yeah.
I miss these hits.
Welcome back, John.
Welcome back.
Well, it's always good to talk with you guys. I will leave my opinion on mints out of it in fear of angering the host.
Please, I mean, don't hold back. If there's something important you want to throw in, you should.
I'm just saying, if I wanted a mint flavor in my mouth, I would just eat my toothpaste.
There you go. I think you and I are probably pretty closely aligned on this. Yep.
All right. And all I'm here to say is just be nice. Be kind. That's all I'm here to say.
Oh, wow.
All right, John. So here's to, I guess, draft season. If we're at a point, can you call it draft season before the combine?
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can. I think that's fair. Because the Senior Bowl, it's a shrine game.
That's right.
I think you can. Yeah.
So a couple of thoughts from you, if you would, on what kind of year this is likely to be in terms of the draft.
It seems like so far, and I'm still working my way through the class and the tape and the evaluation stuff, but it seems like so far we don't have a whole lot of guys that everybody would just say, oh, yeah, these are obviously elite players in the class. There's a couple of guys I think are elite, but I don't think there's like a big consensus group at the top. But as I'm working my way through the class, I kind of think like edge defender, linebacker, safety, corner almost always has that. Like the defensive positions, I don't know that this is the year. Defensive tackle is probably a different conversation, but I think the defensive position groups have a decent amount of depth, and maybe there's not like a ton of stars, but I think we have some pretty high. So I think it's actually a decent defensive class, which, I think last year was probably on the lower end for defense. So decent defensive class, really just a tough class on the offensive line, really tough class at quarterback. Those are obviously pretty premier positions. Wide receivers, solid, but there's some question marks, I think, with the guys at the top, like with Tyson's health, I think, specifically, and some of those. So there's going to be some of those. I don't think we have like a tight end that's like, oh, this guy's clearly elite or anything like that. So, that's probably where, in the running back depth being bad, like it's probably offensively, which obviously for fantasy purposes gets a lot of buzz and, doesn't have that buzz this year. So maybe that's why people are saying it's a down class.
I'm just sort of chuckling as you're saying about last year's class maybe not being a great defensive class, and the Bills went defense like pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4. I'll stop because I don't remember pick 5 might have been the tight end. I don't even know. But like, wow, they leaned into it, and they at least looked like a hit on Deion Walker in the 4th round, who had a nice rookie season, and we'll see about Hairston, the first pick, but everybody else was sort of uneven because of injury, and even Hairston was uneven because of injury.
Yeah, I mean, they went defense with their first 5 picks, I think, and right now it's like just hard to see like what's the return on that investment going to be. I think we just need to give it time because, as you said, there was some injury stuff, and I think with TJ Sanders, it's going to be a question of whether he can stay on the field for more than – like it's not the NFL where you can just, we'll just roll him out there on 3rd downs and he can rush a little bit. Like teams are throwing the ball on 1st down. They're running the ball on 3rd down. It's just not that simple right now in the league, so he's going to have to prove he's an every down guy. I think Jackson is going to have to prove that he can be really valuable on the downs they probably drafted him to be valuable, or replace guys like A.J. Epinesa. And Walker right now looks like the best of both worlds, but what does it look like for him when the role and the profile gets bigger? I think that'll be a big question going into his 2nd season.
With Jon Ledyard, so the Bills again pick at 26. I mean, again, if it's not the exact number, in that range. And we're always talking about wide receiver up here. And it seems like it might be as different as years can be. Like there's just the one quarterback maybe this year in the 1st round, for example. But at 26, are we talking about wide receiver 5? Is this like 2 years ago where the Bills traded down, ended up with Keon Coleman at pick 33, that was wide receiver 8 in that class already by the first pick of the 2nd round? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a year or two, John, where instead of doing something like that, you might be more content to wait until day 2 or even day 3. What does the wide receiver landscape look like to you?
I think it is currently a decent group. I think the real question will be like, what's the high-end upside for a guy like Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon seem like solid players, like good players. Like, do they have high-end upside, or are they like more like what we would, I don't necessarily think of it this way all the time, but like, are they more like what we consider like sporting role or number 2 type of players?
Mm-hmm.
are they guys that your offensive system will matter? Like for the Bills, for example, like is Mekhi Lemon that valuable of a player to them when they have a player like Khalil Shakir on their team already? Is that like, okay, we're trying to build our wide receiver room like a basketball like a basketball team, and we need more of a different type of player than Mekhi Lemon's type of player, and or Shakir's type of player. So, Jordan Tyson's the one that if you just like watch the best plays, you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy's the most talented. But then he's the injury history and some consistency stuff or questions. Whereas with Tate and Lemon, you feel like you're getting at least like a higher floor. And then after that, it really feels like a little bit of a mixed bag. I think Omar Cooper's really interesting. It feels like the buzz is starting to build for him. I've been pretty high on him all the way through the season. I think Denzel Boston's a guy getting buzz because there's just like seems like there's all this, what could he be? Like is in Zachariah Branch too, I think is what could he be types of players, which maybe that's enough. I think a lot of the time it gets pretty foolish for wide receiver trying to go that route. And the Bills have experienced some of that too, I think, at this position. So Omar Cooper's a guy that I think is going to have the buzz building. He could be the one at that spot in the draft for them that if they do decide to go wide receiver, which they have some other needs too, as I'm sure we'll discuss. But I think he'd be the guy that like stands out to me right now. I have to watch a little bit more Chris Bell. I know some people are kind of into him. I have to watch more of Boston. But I'm pretty intrigued by Omar Cooper and just the ability to get open that he has, but also he made a lot of really tough catches this past season, does some great work in the red area. I think they definitely could benefit from a player like that. So he's one that's intriguing to me. I think the class is probably you're going to see wide receivers pushed into people's top 100s, but that's just because people value the position and fantasy football and the effect of all that. I don't know necessarily that I would look at the class and say, oh, yeah, it's so good at like as you get down the class, there's all these guys that can contribute. I don't necessarily see it that way right now.
We've only sort of begun, our quest to find the next great Bills wide receiver here in this year, 2026. John, are the two guys or three, the guy you mentioned, Tyson has got injury problems or concerns at least, Tate, Lemon. Is there anybody up there that's worth trying to get from 26 to like the top 10 or right around the top 10? Or do you think, is it too early for you to answer that definitively, which I will understand? Do you think there's a player worth making a big move for?
I think, it might be a little bit early, but I'll try to answer it anyway. I think talent-wise, Tyson is the guy that's pretty interesting to me. It's just a question how much you trust the other stuff and then how polished he is. Like, he's the guy to me that has probably the highest upside of anybody in the class. We talked about Lemon and just maybe not being like for another team, maybe I really like Lemon, and for another team, maybe that would be like a good option or a potential option. Although it depends how many spots are coming up. Probably I'm not a big trade up guy, and then Tate I think I just don't know if he's that like I like Tate for sure. I don't know that I jump up let's hypothetically say 15 spots for a guy like that in this class, and that's part of the trick of all this, right? Is that you're not necessarily looking at a great free agent group, and you're not necessarily looking at a draft that has a ton of options, especially in the range that the Bills draft in. And so you are sort of looking at, again, at a season, I think, where unless something happens, which just like, let's be honest, like there is a world in which the A.J. Brown conversation happens for a lot of teams this offseason. There's a world in which Nico Collins conversations happen for a lot of teams. That one's pretty under the radar right now. And there's a world in which some of these conversations happen with bigger name receivers. And we'll see where it gets to. But I would imagine if you're one of those players, you'd be looking at Buffalo and saying, you know what? I could get all the targets I want there, and I can play with Josh Allen, and I can play in the prime of his career in a window in which they're trying to win the Super Bowl for an offensive-minded head coach. And I think there's a lot of positives there that I think would add up pretty quickly if a big trade does happen.
Nico Collins, question mark, eyeballs, emoji,
Yeah.
John?
That one's a little under the radar right now, but we'll see. Let's just see what happens this offseason is all I'm saying. I don't know that he's that kind of guy, but I think that there will be intrigue building there.
Interesting.
And we'll see. We'll see.
Making a note of it for tonight's ADP Chasing episode, free on YouTube, starting at 7:30. With Jon Ledyard here on WGR 107.7 and 104.7 FM. Is wide receiver as valuable in the league as it was 4 years ago? Is there a fundamentally different league now where maybe that position's value is mitigated slightly or no? John? Don't tell me that the ADP chasing promo set him off.
No, it was FM.
He's not on a.
He was only
He
prepared to be
didn't know.
broadcast on AM radio today.
He's thinking I need to triple my asking fee now because of this revelation.
This FM talk. I think we've got John back.
John, you there?
Sorry, we lost you there.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I was just so excited about the question that apparently you lost me for a second there. But
Wide receiver's importance.
it's a dangerous question to ask me on the radio because I feel very passionate about this. I think more than anything, the position, what valuable at the position has changed. Whereas 10 years ago, even let's say, there was a lot of emphasis on players who play outside the numbers, who could win as a primary X receiver, and who could beat press man coverage. And those things were really, really important, and you needed vertical passing play games. And so guys that could win that way were really, really important. I still think that role is important, but we have seen a different type of receiver become very valuable in the NFL, where the Amon-Ra St. Brown's, Puka Nacua, the guys who can play every single wide receiver position, who can play from condensed formations and reduce splits, right? That's really important. We're playing so much condensed in today's league that it doesn't really, the outside the numbers play isn't as valuable as it once was. Still matters, but it's not as valuable as it once was. So we think we just see, I wouldn't say the position is less important than it was. I think the position's still really important. I think that just the different types of players that can win in today's NFL vary a lot more than they used to at this position, where you have more guys that can win, especially because the middle of the field and the intermediate areas of the field are such an area of emphasis for successful offenses. Guys who are high IQ players who catch the football really well in small spaces and who understand how to read zone coverage. We play in an 80% zone coverage league, and so guys who understand zone and understand how to beat it are now as valuable, if not more valuable, than guys who used to beat press man. Back in the era, we had a lot of that. We just have less of that today's league. So different types of receivers are just way more valuable than they used to be.
Jon Ledyard on the Wester Hotline with us for a few more minutes here, taking an initial look here at this year's NFL draft. You mentioned the class at edge and pass rusher, and that is certainly going to be an area that we're going to spend a lot of time on, despite our reputation here at the station for being, just focused on wide receiver. The Bills, I was just saying earlier in our show today, John, that after the 2020 AFC title game loss in Kansas City, the Bills sort of set out on a quest to find ways to get Mahomes / the quarterback on the ground. They drafted Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham that year with their first 2 picks. Rousseau is still here on an extension. Basham never really made it. And here we are, right, going into a 6th draft since then. And they still have not found their way to a guy. Right? They've thrown money at it with Von Miller, and that got undone largely by injury. They threw, a flyer on Joey Bosa at it, pretty modest money for 1 year. That didn't really get it done. And so I'm back to, I got to find an impact edge player, and I can go shopping in the trade market for Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson as a free agent maybe if he makes it to market, or I can try to find my way to a guy in the draft. I'm getting the sense that there's a lot of options at edge in the top end of this draft class.
There are a lot of options. It's one of the tricky parts of this is pretending that I'm Brandon Beane and I'm looking at things through his lens and trying to draft the types of edges that he seems to care about and draft, which is, the bigger guys, longer guys, those types of players. It's like, are they going to take Keldrick Falk? Are they going to be the Zion Young team? Is that going to be of interest to them? Like, those guys fit the profile kind of what the Bills have targeted in the draft. And then there's they actually haven't done that poorly, I don't think, on the free agent part of this. They obviously got unlucky with the Von Miller injury. And then, I thought Bosa was for what they paid for him was really good for them last year. I don't know that I would count on that happening again or anything, but I think that they haven't, it's not like he doesn't understand this position at all. It's just the reality is that explosiveness wins in today's NFL. It is the number one trait for edge defenders. And I love all the things from the physical makeup of the player that he likes too, but you need twitch off the ball, and the Bills just have had no twitch off the ball. It has been a real issue for them having that explosiveness at the edge defender spot. And so there are a lot of names in this class, who's going to be in line with them and who's going to be in line with what they desire in the draft. I do think Falk could be a little bit of a faller the type they've taken in the past. Zion Young right now, as I predicted a couple months ago, is shooting up boards, although I think that is just because he has the physical profile of a Greek god rather than the tape being like so unbelievable. So we'll see what happens, but I do think the depth of the edge class is more impressive than like anybody they'll get at 26, just so much better than who they'll get in the second round. To me, like you're probably looking at a group that's pretty similar from that range, maybe even into the third round, depending on how many go off the board. But I think you're going to have a lot of guys pretty tightly grouped as like solid and kind of have similar potential rather than like having a bunch of elites that like the class falls off after the fourth guy. I don't necessarily see it that way
Just
right
to
now.
fill this out for people who may be hearing some of these names for the first time, Zion Young is Missouri 6'5", 262, at least the measurables I'm looking at. Falk is Auburn 6'6", 285. So, yeah, that's Epinesa, that's Rousseau. That's that type player, like body type anyway.
You know, if I thought, like, say Brandon Beane calls us this time, and if I knew he was going to do this, I would be like, I'd start the conversation with a question about these edge guys, hoping that he would be like, would you guys stop bitching about edge for once? Wouldn't that be the best? If he did, whatever they say next time, he just complains about whatever they start with. That'd be the best. John, 2 minutes. So the Bucs and the Steelers, the teams you cover and like, maybe, right? I mean, the most closely.
I grew up a Steelers fan, and I've covered both, yes.
Yes. What happened to the Bucs this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that Baker Mayfield's play fell off is probably the number one thing, and some of that is not having Liam Cohen. There were growing pains, I think, with Josh Grizzard, but I think Baker Mayfield just didn't play as well. Straight up was a big part of it. They had a ton of injuries on offense, especially in the early part of the season when they actually played better, but I think a lot of those caught up with them. Guys didn't necessarily come back till like even the end of the season. Even not having Mike Evans, I mean, the team relies a lot on him still. He is still such a difference-making type of player. And so I think that one definitely hurt them, just not being healthy on that side of the ball. And Baker played really pressed a lot of the season, I thought, and that really caught up with them. And then I think defensively, what we learned is that this team is drafted well, but they haven't had drafts that put you in a special tier of group. They've rebuilt this entire defense since the Super Bowl season, through the draft basically. And they've not really done much outside hiring, especially not big free agent contracts or anything like that. So they've hit on a lot of those picks to a degree, but it's just hard when you have that many young players you're relying on. And then you have any type of injury. Losing Kalijah Kancey was just huge. To lose him for the whole season was pretty brutal. He's a really important player to what they do. And I think a lot of their drafted players played fine, but they just don't have the star potential. They don't have anybody who changes the game, especially in their front defensively. Vita Vea is a great player for what he is, but they don't really have anybody who changes the game from a pass rush, explosive plays behind the line of scrimmage standpoint, down in, down out. And so I think they are going to be one of the players this offseason for Max Crosby, and I think they're going to hope that puts them in a different tier of team than just a bounce-back team next season. That'd be a nice story, but they're trying to compete for Super Bowls, and they need to make some sort of a splash in order to do that.
Will there ever be a second Sean Tucker game, the first being
game
his
here
game
against
here?
the Bills, right?
And then Pittsburgh, John, like maybe you look at it through a different lens. Bulldog and I were talking early in the show today about how many teams in the AFC could be considered the team to beat. And I think there are as many as 8, maybe 9, where you could make a case. I wouldn't say Pittsburgh is one of them, but is there a path where they can get really good soon?
No path to me, unfortunately. I think they just made it's for my opinion. I just think they made totally the wrong hire, and I think they made the wrong organizational direction choice. I'm not sure what you'd consider this direction, just like maxing out a pretty average team. I think, I don't know whether Watt's going to be around. I don't know whether Cam Hayward's going to be around. I think they're still, especially Hayward, one of their best players. Watt's still a really good player. I'm not really sure what it is that they're doing this season, trying to go for it with Aaron Rodgers and hope that the oldest guys in your roster stick around when you kind of desperately need to try something different. I know they don't have a lot of draft options maybe at quarterback, so maybe that's why they're doing it. But to me, this just seems like a really limited ceiling type of a move, and I don't really see how McCarthy profiles as the guy that's going to develop your next young great quarterback. That's not, even if you want to say that he did that with Rodgers, it's been so long since that happened. A lot of the guys he's worked with, Favre, Prescott, Montana, they were already established at that point in time. So I just don't know how they see that as a fit for where they're going as a franchise.
Very good, John. Always great to hear that you're going to be on with us. Today, no exception. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Jon Ledyard at Ledyard NFL Draft